48-hour art check, round 71. Here we are again.
Yes. At the end of a very long week, and I am happy it's Friday. So, yeah.
Yep. And I just remembered that I loaded this, or I forgot to load this image. But the last time we were talking about story, and
Yeah.
So I just loaded that up. But before we get started, if you're watching this, make sure to share it so we can get you and other people, your friends, family, coworkers, in the chat. Anyway, and like and subscribe. But we last time we were talking about storytelling and why storytelling is important, and we asked a question of why some of our watchers, readers, listeners, viewers, people, friends, community, whatever we want to call them, why they tell stories. And Marshall Lee had a great answer. He said, "Great episode, guys. So happy you're touching on story. It's one of my favorite subjects, if not my favorite. The question on why pertaining to any topic seems to always be the hardest question to answer." And I totally agree, because then you start thinking kind of really deeply. I think a big reason why I'm interested in creating stories is, as somebody who's been mostly an introvert and a quiet person, and not a great conversationalist, I've often had a hard time expressing myself clearly and holding people's attention. So the opportunity to be able to craft a story where I can more clearly communicate and hold people's attention is appealing to me, which is an interesting way. Because go ahead.
I just gotta chime in there and just say I completely relate to that, because I think one of the first times I really got drawn into making stories was indeed for that reason. Like, I wanted to express something to people. I couldn't seem to get it in words. I think that actually is what got me into drawing, even as a kid, when I was isolated or whatever, or would have trouble communicating something. It was like a way to express it, and a way to express it where you don't need words. You can just kind of lay it out there, or you can take time to craft the right words. And so yeah, like when I read that, man, this whole comment, I mean, we got to read more of it, but this whole comment was just super exciting, because it was just such a thoughtful response. So thank you, Marsh, too, by the way.
Another big reason is that I believe that story is probably the most natural and most powerful form of communication we have. And I really like how it can break through presuppositions and contain a subversive quality. We have seen story change our world in good and bad ways, and I feel like I have something of benefit to express. I'm reminded of something my buddy Foie Storm said here on YouTube many times, that there are two sides to a discussion, and each side wants to be heard, so they yell at each other louder in an effort to be heard, but when it comes down to it, neither side is actually listening. And that part of the comment was super interesting to me, because if you look at demagogues and dictators, and you also look at unifiers and peacemakers, they do have something in common. Not their intent or their ends, but the idea that they use stories to unite people behind them. And it's interesting. So you get you get Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin and those guys, and even ISIS and Taliban and whatever. And it's always like, let's unite together against this people. Like, we hate this group of people, and let me tell you a bunch of stories about how they've screwed us all over and why they're bad. And then you start using very specific language to dehumanize them and whatever. And then you have people like Gandhi, and you have people like Martin Luther King, who went a different route, but they still told stories. I mean, Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech is literally, let me tell you a story about how this could be. Like, my kids could play with your kids. And he painted a picture, a narrative that people could get behind and be like, yeah, I actually really like that idea of kids of all colors, hanging out and playing in the street. He didn't just say, let me break it down economically. Here are a bunch of facts and figures. He's like, let me paint a picture and tell you a story, which is fascinating.
Yeah. No, that is. And story seems like just such a uniting factor, and it does seem interesting that kind of the arc of the story, whether it's painting a vision of a positive future, or whether it's uniting people in kind of hatred over something. And what's funny is the uniting people over hatred over something isn't always bad either, which is weird. I mean, in the cases we mentioned, it is.
Yeah.
But let's say there's something really terrible going on in society that really needs to change.
Yeah.
Getting people united in like anger over that actually can work. But it's interesting that story is that common thread where it kind of can move people to action.
Yeah. One of the best ways I've seen that done is, and I hope I get the name of this charity correct, but it's Love 146, I believe, is the charity. Are you familiar with that? It's a guy who, and I can't remember exactly why, but for some reason he was embedded, kind of inside a sex trafficking ring, to basically break it up, and but he had to like infiltrate it, and so he was talking about like seeing these children being sold off into sex slavery, and there was one girl whose number was 146 who looked him who looked him in the eyes, and he was like, we're not doing enough. Like, we don't just need to destroy these rings. We need to like rehabilitate the people that are involved. And so after he busted up that ring, like he got to the top and, took everybody out and whatever, which is probably less Liam Neeson and more like just paperwork. But he started this charity because of number 146, because she looked him in the eyes. And the charity's pitch of like how you help these children rehabilitate and like live a normal life and get counseling and job training and all this stuff is he tells that story. And so
nice.
the way that he tells it, like, I have a deep and abiding hatred for sex traffickers, and that story has helped like fan that flame, even though that has never personally touched my life in any way that I'm aware of. Hearing that story has united me against that group of people. And so you're right. It's a weird thing to say, but it is something that can be used for good. Because I don't think anybody in their right mind would ever find a moral argument for defending somebody who sells children into sex slavery. And we should all hate them. They're like terrible people.
Yeah, no, I would say anybody making that argument is either being like a contrarian jerk, or they're just like not really. Yeah, it's just that. Yeah.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah, and so then he says, a story without ill intent has an amazing potential to break down walls, open up a discussion, remind us of what's important, diffuse a tense environment, and overall bring humanity back into view. At the moment, I'm mostly creating fun, escapist, situational stories, but I hope to one day be able to bring some of these elements into my story as well. And one thing that I wanted to bring up about that last part is I actually have, I think escapist fiction is extremely important. And I think this is probably something that we should put down as a topic for another thing, because escapism often gets a bad rap as if you're as if it's something bad, but anyway, so
and I think even though I indulge in autobio and stuff, like I think autobio gets falsely labeled as non-escapist. I mean, the nature of anything you're doing for even education is still a slight escapism. So yeah, we should definitely touch on that.
Yeah,
for a topic. Yeah.
So we only have 2 minutes left. Where our intention was to kind of talk about why we each told stories, but Marshall's comment was just so good.
And I agree with it, and it kindles a lot of ideas that I think tie into what we'd probably communicate for why we create stories too. So thank you for sharing that, Marshall, and if anybody else wants to share their experiences too, like I find it really fascinating and interesting to hear what drives you guys out there in our community. Most of us are making stuff, and so what is it that's driving you? Like, let us know in the comments.
Yeah,
that was really cool. And Marshall, just he's really good at igniting like some really great topics.
Yeah. For somebody who claims to be a poor conversationalist, he sure seems to spark a lot of conversation based on what he says.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm trying to think of how we can cap it in like a
Well,
minute.
I'm curious if you would expound his first part of that comment you seem to identify with. I didn't grow up as an introvert, though I've probably transitioned into somebody who at least behaves more like an introvert than an extrovert. But I'm
Yeah.
curious. I'm curious on what it is about the need to connect to people, even if you don't feel like your personality is one where you like to reach out in person. Like what is that for you? I'm curious.
It's interesting because I was not an introverted kid. In fact, I had like I had kind of the opposite problem. Like I'd over talk and overshare, and I'd just walk up to random strangers and just start talking to them and stuff. But I've always had this issue. I still do. It's funny how like a lot of those things from like when you're younger don't totally disappear. Something I'm much more conscious of and try to work on. But sometimes I will word things in a way that comes across the wrong way, or I choose the wrong word, and there's like this there's a frustration that exists in communication,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's unique to me. I think that's something most people experience. And I do remember as a kid there was this beauty to just being able to draw something because it like opened up this realm of communication that was much more intentional. um, and and then when it came to story, it's beautiful because you can really be more intentional about your words and where your words are leading people and kind of the arc of the story, and you can really think it out and communicate the message you intend.
Yeah.
um, and the beauty of it is once it's written down, it kind of is hard to sort of extrapolate more than what is intended, even if it's like you can extrapolate your own meaning, but you can't obscure what's actually in the context of the book. And that to me is like you know I, once again, like a lot of our discussions, like that could fall apart. I could see somebody countering that with like, well, somebody could get the wrong idea from what you're writing. I mean, you know uh, somebody heard Helter Skelter and decided, oh, that song's telling me to murder people.
Right.
So there's always the chance of somebody taking something that's kind of fun or has a different intent and warping it. But just for myself, I have found this level of communication, especially in comics, um, that is much more like it's a way that I can talk about something like mental illness in a way where if we had a conversation, I don't know if I could talk about it as clearly as I
Right.
can by just kind of showing it
Yeah.
and showing the reality of it and having that words and pictures and kind of threading it in a way to kind of make that more clear, in a way that I don't think a conversation could do.
Well, and there's a
So
huge
that's,
difference
yeah,
between telling a story and having a conversation, because having a conversation, you're getting and receiving input, you're giving and receiving input, you are feeding off of the other person as well, and so it does. A conversation is a mixture of you and someone else or a group of other
yeah,
people, whereas telling a story is more often than not, the way that you want to tell it. The feedback is significantly delayed and doesn't necessarily impact the story, though it might impact the next issue or the next book or whatever. But the feedback is not real time like it is in a conversation. And so yeah, I could see that. Like I know that just with you and I, neither of us really get out the complete thought that we intend to get out, because the other one gets excited. I always feel bad afterwards, but it makes for good conversation. But you'll say something and I'll jump in and interrupt you, and then I'll say something, you'll jump in and interrupt me, and it becomes this back and forth, and together we kind of explore these topics in an interesting way. But it's much different than if you were to tell a story. And so when I read your comic, I get way more out of your story than when I have a conversation with you about it, because I can't interrupt you. I can only turn the page, and
yeah.
and so it's kind of an interesting dynamic, and both are good, but very different and for different reasons.
Yeah, and there's a level of craft to it that allows a different kind of truth to kind of speak through. I mean, there's a lot of truth you can get in a conversation with someone, but there's a lot of truth from a really well um, well formulated story. And then there can be a lot of deception in a well formulated story
Right.
because there are tricks,
Right.
and so it really is. But anyhow, when I read that from Marshall, I was just like, it did kind of hit home because I was thinking about what drove me to write like my first stories, and there was something really beautiful when I was even a little kid about being able to like staple some pages together and like draw some pictures and make a story and have it be mine and like it not get corrupted by something, whereas like most of your experience as a young kid is like, even if you're a popular kid, it's like a lot of it is communication getting slightly corrupted. So
Yeah.
it is kind of, I don't know, there's something really neat about it. I haven't quite pinned it down, but I loved that comment because it just brought a lot of thought. And there's so many things. I mean, he got into the subversion of story, which would be a great topic too.
Yeah.
Like the subversive nature of even telling stories. And I think a really telling sign too is when you have, really oppressive governments, how stringent they are on controlling storytelling.
Yeah.
And that to me is really a clue as to like the power of story, is the fact that like perfect example, I mean it's extreme, but I mean Hitler had people burning books that had stories that he thought could be kind of dangerous,
Right.
and dangerous to kind of controlling people's thoughts, because if they read the wrong stories they might get ideas and then they might not be on board with like brainwashing kids and
Right.
taking over governments and demonizing people. So it's it's a great topic, man. I mean, what a great answer. So thanks again, Marshall. I keep saying thanks, but it was really cool to read.
Yeah. Well, good. So
All right,
should we jump into the art check?
yeah, let's do this business.
Okay. Do you want to start?
Sure, I will start. So I managed to, I finished the inking the lettering for my page, and I have inked 2 panels. So panel 1 and panel 2 of the page. Panel 2 might need a little bit more work, but I'm feeling good about it, and it's kind of neat to be this far into my comic. Like I'm starting to see a tiny pinprick of light, like like that end is getting closer, and it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. That's cool. I sent my stuff off to the flatter, and so I got these flats, and I've been adjusting the flats into closer to the colors that I want them to be. So it's kind of a longer process because there's so many different characters, but I'm liking how it looks. I don't like the overall tone yet because I'm not at a tone level.
Yeah,
And I'll be adding in kind of highlights and shadows later, but I'm just kind of dialing in like basic colors for the characters so that I can kind of dial them in further.
I
So
love it. That's awesome.
yeah, it's
And
turning out. Sorry, go ahead.
it just looks like some really clean selections too. So I'm gonna have to get that flatter.
Oh man,
That is
he's.
their info from you.
I sent it to him. He got it back to me in like 8 hours. It's crazy. He's super fast and awesome. And I almost hesitate to give his name over the air because I don't want him to get everybody and their dog because he's really awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you reach out to
Well,
me,
after.
I'll probably tell you. If you're listening and you really want to know, hit me up on Twitter or something, and I'll let you know who it is. But yeah, how about challenges for you?
Um, it's funny. My biggest challenges are kind of the typical ones. This week in particular has been just kind of chaotic at my work. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. I'm training some people, and pulling a lot of overtime, and so it's just like the battle to when just overcoming that like voice that's like, just go to bed right now, and you're like, no, like I gotta get
Yeah,
gotta get my stuff done, but that voice has been really loud this week, and I'm excited that I kind of finished my comic for the night a little early, so I might actually get some rest tonight, which is kind of exciting.
yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. What about you? What were your
Uh,
big?
Mine were kind of weird, but I last night was planning on doing this at my normal time where I start about 9 ish, and at about that time, no, at about 8, I came downstairs and looked at my fish tank, and I have a 125-gallon fish tank with some really big fish that I've been growing for a while. And one of the two filters that I had blown, and so the water gets really murky really fast in that situation with the number of fish I have. And I don't have a fish store in my town, and everything closes at 9. So I had to like drive 30 miles, grab a new one. It was super expensive that we weren't
Oh
planning
man.
on. Drive back, install it, clean the tank, and so like it was like I started at 8 and I was done by like 12:30, just to because had I not done that, like you're just all your fish die, and so uh,
Yeah.
and these aren't like goldfish. They're like like a 12-inch cichlid and an 18-inch, two different 18-inch placostomi, and so they're big fish that I bought at like $5 to $6 a piece, but I've been growing them for a while, and so to replace them at the size that they're at, it's like 60
Oh
to
yeah.
$100 per fish, so I couldn't afford it. So anyway, and I like them, and they're my pets, and I don't want to let them die. So there was that, and then I was like, I still want to work on my thing, so I sat down to work on it, and I forgot to go to bed. So like
Oh no.
I just lost track of time because it was so much fun
Yeah.
that I worked until like 5 in the morning, and so today was tiring. Uh,
Yeah.
so anyway, that's way too. I went way over my 30 seconds, but it was an abnormally time consuming challenge that just happened all of a sudden. So
No, I understand that, man. And it is funny because once you get in that zone, that's been a struggle too. Is like when I do fight the sleep demon, and get my art going, it's really hard to stop once you kind of get in the zone, and it's very easy to like blink and be like, oh my gosh, I have to be to work in like 30 minutes.
right,
Like what am I doing? And then the rest of the day just regretting it. So. Um, yeah, but I'm glad. So you did fix the tank though, right?
yeah. I mean, it's like $250 later, and a bunch of stuff. But the water's super clear, and the fish seem active again. They're pretty sluggish and kind of lethargic and laying on their sides, and now they're back to hit the microphone. They're back to their normal selves where they're swimming around and happy and stuff. And so I think everything's good, and that
Okay,
it
for a
should.
second I thought one of your fish was like he's just like hell no, you
I'm
didn't
not
fix
happy.
me, and like it's like
Oh man, they do. They do every so often. They'll jump and bash into the glass on the top of the tank, um, and it freaks everybody out in the room because it's really loud because they're really big. So
yeah.
anyway, yeah, they will make themselves known when they want to. But yeah, so
Oh
everything's
man.
fine. How about plans?
Plans. So I am hoping to get two more panels inked minimum, because I got a good weekend ahead of me. I'm also hoping to finish up some revisions for a client, a freelance project that I have, and that'll be one of two illustrations off my plate, which would be nice. And maybe even get the roughs for the other illustrations. So that's my plans. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. I am planning on doing the colors for this, and so I'll probably continue to dial the colors in. I'm also going to do videos about the process because I've had several people ask me about the process, and I think it's kind of fascinating the way that it works. I didn't come up with this process, but I've kind of gleaned a bunch of different techniques from different people and kind of merged them to make them my own. Um, and I will start, though likely not finish, the highlights and shadows. And then I'm only 1 or 2 steps away. So I'm hoping to knock this whole thing out by Wednesday. So
Awesome.
by Monday, I'll basically just have spent a ton of time on it. I don't know exactly where I'll get.
Is it weird that I'm like slightly jealous because there's this beautiful moment when you're done with your flats. That's very similar to like the moment when you're done with your tight pencils, where you just get to like do the fun like to me, the rendering's the really fun stuff.
Yeah.
The polishing the colors. The flats are like the headache. The like comping and coming up with the pencils are hard. The inking's kind of fun. So like, at least for me, those are like my two favorite things, and so there is a slight part of me that's like, that looks like it's going to be fun to work on.
It is. Like, I forgot how much fun I have doing this type of thing, but it is really, really fun. And I have the extra added benefit of I flatted 2 characters just because I hadn't done it in a long time, and I do find flats fun for a few minutes, and then I was like, yep, I've reminded myself why I use a flatter. And so then and this is an abnormally complex page. And so I sent it off to this guy and said, hey, how much would you charge me for this one? And he was like, oh, that one's this much. And it was more than he normally charges by more than double. But still a great deal. And still way more, like, it would have taken me 6 hours, to do. And so anyway, so that was good. So my flats were just emailing someone and then going to work. And then they came home and they were done. So it was great.
That's beautiful.
But yeah. So anyway, yeah. So that's good. So we'll reconvene again on Monday. We're still really interested in talking about storytelling. And if you have some reasons why you either tell stories or enjoy consuming stories, whether you listen to those stories, watch those stories, read those stories or whatnot, I'd really like to know why. And if you've never thought about why, take this opportunity to think about why that is, because it's an interesting exercise to ask yourself why, because we consume a huge amount of our time and money in giving and receiving stories. And so Marshall had a great comment. I'd love to hear from the rest of you guys. And if you want to see Josh's stories, go to quarterlystories.com. And if you want to see my stuff, you can go to corykerr.com. And special thanks to No Saboteurs, who also have stories to tell. And if you listen to their lyrics, they're really quite fascinating, actually. And I love the stories that are told in punk music. And you can check their stuff out at facebook.com/No Saboteurs. Everybody have a good weekend. We'll catch you guys on Monday.